Hey, what's up? It's me again. The collective unconscious, how it relates to spiral dynamics. Obviously, it's not really talked about in spiral dynamics, more in SDI, spiral dynamics, integral from Ken Wilber's, more of his discussions and his students' emphases. Where does it begin? Where do you realize that there's a collective unconscious? So it appears that the realization of the collective unconscious, I guess your open mindedness towards it will kind of be dependent on your background and your level of open mindedness. Well, for me, I always believed in like a negative force I stopped believing in a negative force, but then I was forced into it. I stopped believing in negative force in stage, like I was entering the stage green. I stopped believing in it. I was forced back into it after I had spiritual awakenings, and I was in stage. I was tapping into a lot of different stages, so like yellowish and a little starting in coral here, but mostly entering into turquoise. So because of that, it was unique. But I would say, classically speaking, the collective unconscious in regard to shadow, that gets realized more in stage coral, because in stage turquoise you're more accepting and you don't want to kind of look at things from a negative perspective. You focus on the positive. The reason is because you just got out of yellow, which is kind of nerve wracked with wanting to obtain all this knowledge. And turquoise has this epiphany. You don't need to rush around. You don't need to be chaotic. And that serene is harmonious with the positive aspects of the collective unconscious or God. And so the shadow goes to the wayside. Once you get into coral, then the concept of people doing bad things comes back into play. And so therefore people in stage coral, they want justice more, well, not in the green way, but they want things to get moving. They want changes. So their desire is to be understood, and that manifests in a kind of passive aggressiveness. And that passive aggressiveness is part and parcel with their undealt with rage, masculine, undealt with energy, that shadow energy. But you realize there's evil, but you don't realize that you're the evil. Well, you know that you know intellectually you're part with the evil itself, but you're not as focused on that. In stage teal is when you finally realize, for some reason, stage teal is where you realize it, is that you are both the devil. Like it finally hits you like you're the devil, you know. Like you'll have a realization here and there in turquoise, and you'll believe it maybe in coral because you're so controlling. Like, yeah, I have a lot of devil energy in me. You know, you're just accepting it. But in teal, you really mean it because you then start to become serene, but you can't control the negative energy that pervades over. You need a system to kind of, well, you need a system to get out your energy in stage coral, but you need to recognize that there's a part of you that you're not focusing on. So in stage teal, that's when you notice it really. And in stage Aubergine, what's going to happen is not only are you going to notice that you have a shadow and there's a collective shadow, but you're going to be forced to deal with that collective shadow, knowing that you are the shadow and the shadow is everyone, and everyone has their demons and baggage, and not dealing with that is causing the havoc around. And that's why people in stage Aubergine, or tapping into this, they feel compelled to bring this topic up of the devil, of evil, of collective unconsciousness. Um, but by stage Aubergine, you're not framing it in the same way. So you're encouraging the aftermath effect of what that entails, but you're not encouraging the discussion of the terminology in the same way of devil. You may say collective unconscious. So in teal, the reason why they frame it collective unconscious or shadow is because it's scientific and it's harmonious. In stage Aubergine, either you'll say, "Oh, people are just evil," and you'll blanket people into these categories, knowing that there's a higher depth to it, um, or you'll know that that evil is the source of negativity in the world, and that's the reason why you have all your voices and you have all your difficulties. But they're forced into it because their voices are not going away. And the reason why voices are so important in stage Aubergine is because you're forced into dealing with your baggage. In stage teal, you can ignore it. You say, oh, you just compartmentalize. I have a shadow, so who the F cares? In stage coral, it's like, yeah, I have a shadow. Go F yourself. I'm gonna do what I want. Yeah, okay, call me the devil. I don't care. Simplistic terminology, low conscious, whatever. Turquoise, you have a shadow. It's like, but you gotta focus on the positive. You are one with God, right? You are the positive. But the shadow really gets dealt with in stage Aubergine, because then you start becoming the shadow. Not in the sense of being bad, but you start allowing yourself to channel the rage in a productive way, which wasn't being done in coral. They didn't have the capacity. It's like red was coral, and now orange is Aubergine. It's like, oh, now we can finally deal with the baggage in a productive manner. And the reason why it's so hard to reach stage orange is because it's a completely new stage of development where you're forced into it. You're forced into dealing with your stuff. You're forced into accepting there's a collective shadow. But they're not using that terminology. Rather, like in coral, they're going to be vague about it. Unless, of course, they had organization and knowledge. So the only time where you realize that there's evil in the world is you realize there's evil in coral, but you realize you realize the truth of a collective shadow in teal because it's unavoidable. It's unavoidable to accept there's a devil in teal. Because the psychic synchronistic phenomenon are unavoidable. And encouragement into psychological loops are unavoidable. And beyond free will. Predetermination. But I mentioned that teal believes in free will. I think that everyone in an advanced state of conscious will believe in predetermination. It'll only be framed in a particular regard. I mean, the predetermination is the fact that there are obstacles in your way from seeing the truth. Or from doing something. But the free will it's not productive to live your life with that mindset. So try to understand that intellectually and then move on and accept that if you take responsibility, it's more efficient to get out of that hole. So that's something they might encourage. But free will is understood as garbage in higher stages. It's garbage. Who's doing the will? Who's doing the action? A collective of ideas, of thoughts that are not predictable. And if someone can predict your actions, therefore it's free will. Once you get to higher stage, you realize it's all a scam. It's just lower mindedness trying to you think a particular way. And sage Aubergine, you'll take methodical steps. And the issue of free will is not it's a distinction, I don't have free will, I have free will. That's not going to get me food. That's not going to get me. That's not going to get people understanding what needs to be done. Talking about whether there's free will is not going to start this organization that's going to conquer our world here. That's going to build empires of psychic people. That's not productive. Who cares? So philosophy is more of like 2 stages above stage Aubergine. Like you have to go the stage past, philosophizing about stuff probably comes back in 2 stages from Aubergine. But right now their priority is to build, to get things rolling. We're tired of lower stages, but we're also tired of we're tired of lower stages not getting it. And now I'm starting to see the reason why they don't get it is because it's a new phase of development. And yet you have to look back and look at orange. I think you have to look at orange. Like blue was preoccupied with the spiritual, Then there was a paradigm shift, and they became interested in material. Now it's the opposite, in a sense. Teal was preoccupied with models, like yellow, because models meant you can help people. So Aubergine says, F all your models. F harmony. Because you're not gonna shake people up to get them stirred for a cause. It's still human nature to collectively group up together. So there's no parallel to blue. There is a parallel to blue in some regard, and they're right. So, but the orange is, in terms of the method and the methodicalness is the parallel to orange. Oh, so the new phase of development is the point. Like, the paradigm shift is so radical from Teal to Aubergine, because Aubergine is allowing or is forced into this perception of you're never alone with yourself. There's always there's always people underneath you, and those people are telling you what to do, and so it's a completely new state of being. Yeah, so what was the whole title of this video? Oh, Collective Shadow. So Aubergine surprisingly doesn't focus on collective shadow because they're so like preoccupied with this concept of different voices. But where are the voices coming from? They're coming from the shadow. They're coming from the shadow that influences different energies into wanting specific things. So there's always going to be a shadow. That gets understood in stage teal very thoroughly. Not always that there's going to be a shadow, but it gets understood that the shadow is what's running our priorities, our agendas, our desires. And in stage, in Aubergine, you want people to know this stuff. You don't want people to. You want people to know, right? You don't want people to talk about this. Generically. Simplistically. You want people to really apply it. Like, oh, the shadow is causing me to have these voices. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about why I feel anger in my body. Why I don't have my needs met. Let's get into that. Let's deal with the shadow. Let's deal with what's causing it. But I don't know. But they're not going to be using the lingo. They just, on a rational level, they're just going to want upward movement. And upward movement entails conglomerating into like a group. So when I see people who are talking about spiral dynamics, getting together with those people is not a stage choral. That's a stage Aubergine. So it's human nature to conglomerate. So just because you're going together in groups doesn't mean you're part of Aubergine. It could be you're part of a whole array of stages. Yellow and turquoise and coral and teal. But chances are, if you're all conglomerating, you're going to be sharpening ideas and advancing slowly, and eventually people are going to be in higher and higher stages just by getting together. So I wouldn't worry about developing a group and then you're really in a lower stage. So although it's not like the pivotal factor that you're going to conglomerate together to sharpen ideas and to build something unique, but it's certainly one of the things that's going to happen. It's not necessarily from a need for community as much as it is a need for the truth to get out. And I think the parallel to the orange is orange wants truth. It wants material. It wants objective truth. Same thing here. I'm hearing voices. They're in my heart. I'm hearing them. That's a new phase. Let's talk about this. But those voices, where are they coming from? They're you. It's your world. It's your imagination, right? So, but once you experience like a psychic reality where like you think something and someone else hears it in the other side of the room, oh my gosh, we're psychic. We're one. That dynamic is a real dynamic. It's not theory. It's fact. So that becomes the materialistic world of the Aubergine. And so they want to apply it practically speaking. But in higher stages, you'll probably realize, oh, That's imagination. That's our imagination. I'm we're both imagining it, and we're both allowing that imagination to exist. And because we're in a higher state of consciousness, that psychic connection exists. So they'll create systems that cater to the psychic reality, but higher stages will try to remind you that you don't need to be you don't need to, not necessarily you don't need to be psychic. You'll probably always have that, but you don't need to live by it. You don't need to make decisions based on a psychic conversation you could be having. Now, when I say psychic conversation, I'm not saying I'm not trying to protect mentally ill people who believe they're having conversations with people in their minds, because that could be interpreted. People do this. People can do this. They can have psychic conversations. In stage Aubergine, what I'm making the claim is that's the reality. And higher stages will eventually say you don't need to take those conversations seriously, because everything is imagination, including the psychic conversations. But chances are, if enough people evolve, then you'll just have psychic conversations. Sage Aubergine. And that'll be the new materialist paradigm. And that's where the materialist paradigm exists. Meaning they take it seriously enough to believe that these are real conversations you're having. No, we've always been one. We just pretended that we were not. Now we know we're one more on a higher level. And we're acting as if we are. And that becomes our materialist paradigm. That's the parallel to the orange stage. But eventually you're going to advance past that and say, no, that conversation itself, we could have done much higher than that by realizing that meditation, I don't know, you'll have to look at sage green by branching out and psychically helping people is better. I don't know. But the point is, I guess there will be some parallels, but not that many. There won't be like a perfect parallel, but there'll be some parallel. This is all interesting stuff.